December 22nd, 1981, Burke County, North Carolina. 19-year-old Rhonda Hinson is driving home from an office Christmas party when she is murdered under very strange circumstances. Rhonda's vehicle crashes into the ditch after an unknown assailant somehow manages to fire a bullet straight into her heart. After that, the trail went cold. Hello everyone, and welcome to the fourth episode of The Trail Went Cold. I am your host, Robin Warder, and today I am actually going to be covering a case which is a suggestion from a listener. As I've mentioned on previous episodes, I am a frequent poster in the Unsolved Mysteries forum at the Sitcoms Online message board, and a few weeks ago when I posted the debut episode of The Trail Went Cold there, a fellow Unsolved Mysteries fan under the username, and I don't know how to pronounce this username, so I'm just going to spell it. The username is JJMCGR. They suggested a few cases that they would like to see covered on this podcast, and one of them was the bizarre murder of a young lady named Rhonda Hinson. This story was originally profiled on an episode of Unsolved Mysteries in November 1989. I've also briefly written about it in my List First article, 10 Unsolved Christmas Time Mysteries, which was published in December 2014. And this case has remained unsolved for over 34 years now, and it's a pretty unusual one, so I definitely think it deserves some analysis here. But before we get started, I would like to thank everyone from the Unsolved Mysteries forum and the Unresolved Mysteries Reddit for all your comments and feedback on the first few episodes. You guys are my primary audience for this podcast, and I appreciate you listening to it. We're starting to pick up more and more followers as each episode gets posted, and I'm extremely thankful for your support. The Trail Went Cold runs on a bi-weekly schedule, and a new episode is posted every other Wednesday. We've now got our own Facebook and Twitter pages, and we're also available for download on iTunes now, so if you like the podcast, be sure to subscribe to it. I also need to provide the obligatory shout-out to McGill Foot, who edits and assembles this podcast together for me. And, of course, he's my fellow co-owner of The Back Row, the pop culture website which hosts this very podcast. And, of course, I would also like to send another big shout-out to Vince Nitro, who composes the eerie music you hear on every single episode. So, anyway, let's get started on today's mystery. Our story starts out in 1981 in Burke County, North Carolina, and our central figure is Rhonda Hinson, who is 19 years old and lives in the small town of Valdez with her parents Judy and Bobby Hinson. Rhonda had just graduated from high school and was working her first job, a clerical position for the Hickory Steel Company in the nearby town of Hickory, which was approximately 10 miles away from Valdez. Anyway, on the evening of December 22nd, Rhonda attended a workplace Christmas party at the American Legion Hall in Hickory and left sometime after midnight. Now, there are differing accounts about what actually happened next. In the original Unsolved Mysteries segment, they claim that Rhonda left with two girlfriends and dropped them off before heading home. But according to the Burke County Sheriff's Office website and some of the news articles I've read about this case, Rhonda actually left her car at a friend's house before she went to the party, and then she went back there after the party to pick up her vehicle for the drive home. And I'm assuming this scenario is probably the more accurate one because it's got some interesting implications which I will discuss later. But either way, what we do know for sure is that Rhonda was driving alone from Hickory to her home in Valdez when tragedy struck. Now, the next part is pretty eerie. Apparently at around 1 a.m., Rhonda's mother, Judy Hinson, claimed that she suddenly woke up with a strange premonition and had this horrible feeling that something had happened to Rhonda. So Judy wakes up her husband, Bobby, and asks him to go check the police scanner they have in their home, and sure enough, they hear a police dispatch about a homicide. And it turns out, sadly, that the victim is Rhonda, and the police have just found her car in the ditch. The vehicle's driver's side door is open, the engine is still running, and Rhonda herself is lying dead a few feet away. The car was found on Mineral Springs Mountain Road, only about a half-mile away from Rhonda's home. Rhonda had been using Interstate 40 for her trip back from Hickory, and had just used the off-ramp to exit onto Mineral Springs Mountain Road. While Rhonda was in the midst of driving up a steep hill, she was killed by an unknown assailant and veered off the road. And it turned out that Rhonda's cause of death was a single bullet from a high-powered rifle. And here's the really weird part. The bullet had actually traveled through the car trunk, through the back seat, and through the driver's seat before it pierced Rhonda straight through the heart and her lung. And what's weirder is that this shot should have killed Rhonda instantly, yet her car door is open and she's lying dead on the ground a few feet away. In fact, it looked like Rhonda's arms had been strategically placed at her side, so it's apparent that someone else had handled her body after she was dead. Of course, investigators are completely baffled by the whole situation because the scene almost resembles a professional assassination, rather than your typical murder of a 19-year-old girl. But then a couple of eyewitnesses come forward, and they provide some really interesting information. Next to the Interstate 40 off-ramp is a bridge which crosses over Mineral Springs Mountain Road, and Rhonda's car was found approximately 200 yards away from it. Well, sometime around 12:15, 12:30 that night, a witness reported seeing a blue Chevrolet containing two white males parked underneath the bridge. This in itself might not be noteworthy, except that approximately 30 minutes later, another witness was driving on Mineral Springs Mountain Road, and he saw a blue Chevy speeding away in the opposite direction. And this is where it gets interesting. Immediately afterward, the witness drives past Rhonda's car while it's in the ditch, and he sees an unidentified man standing by the driver's side door, and it appears that Rhonda is slumped over in the front seat. Now, at the time, the witness just thought it was a couple who were drunk or something, so he didn't think anything of it until he heard the news about Rhonda's murder. When the witness came forward, the police decided to place him under hypnosis so he could remember the scene that night and possibly provide them with more details. The witness recalled the blue Chevy speeding by again, and he seemed pretty certain that there was only one man in the vehicle, not two. He also recalled that the man standing next to Rhonda's car, but unfortunately he just did not get a good enough look at him to provide any specific details. However, he did remember one more intriguing clue. Apparently, he also passed by a dark Trans Am, which was parked just down the road from Rhonda's car. This Trans Am probably belonged to the unidentified man by Rhonda's vehicle, and it's a given this same man took Rhonda's body out of the front seat and laid her by the side of the road. Okay, so the obvious question is, if this was a planned murder, why would Rhonda Hinson, of all people, be targeted? Well, Rhonda had actually been displaying some pretty strange behavior prior to her death to suggest that something might be wrong. Even though Rhonda always used to drive places on her own, she started asking her father, Bobby, to accompany her whenever she took trips into town. And during one of these drives, Rhonda suddenly told her father that she had something bad to tell him, which he probably wouldn't like. Bobby tried urging his daughter to come clean about whatever was bothering her, but she ultimately decided to stay silent and never did tell him what was wrong. And a short time later, Rhonda was having a conversation with her mother, Judy, when she randomly decided to ask her if it was ever okay to date a married man. Of course, Judy told Rhonda that no, it's not okay, but Rhonda never did provide an explanation about why she asked that question. And also, in the weeks leading up to her murder, Rhonda started growing paranoid and suffering from insomnia. In fact, she would often get up in the middle of the night to take showers, and when her mother asked why she kept doing that, Rhonda said it was because she felt dirty. Now, experts will tell you that this type of behavior is common among women who have been sexually assaulted, and that they'll sometimes have this compulsive need to constantly shower in order to deal with the trauma. So, we do have some possible motives here for why someone would want Rhonda dead, but there's never been any substantiated information about unsavory stuff which might have been going on in Rhonda's personal life, so we have no idea if any of these theories are true. Anyway, Burke County does not seem like an area which is used to a lot of violent crime, so this is definitely the most investigated case in their history. But even though Rhonda's murder is still unsolved, it hasn't been forgotten. Investigators are still working on the case, and it still gets coverage in the media every now and then. In 2007, a DNA sample was found on the sweater Rhonda was wearing that night, and it did not match her. This DNA likely belongs to the man who pulled her body out of the car, but even though it has been logged into a database, there has been no match thus far. An anniversary article about this case was published by Fox News just this past Christmas, and it actually contained a few interesting pieces of information which weren't mentioned in the Unsolved Mysteries segment. It turns out that Rhonda had a boyfriend at the time of her death who was attending college out of town, but he had just returned home for the holidays. Apparently, the boyfriend did not want Rhonda to go to the Christmas party that night. In fact, Rhonda herself was reluctant to go, but she still wound up going anyway. And when Rhonda picked up her vehicle from her friend's house after the party, she also called her boyfriend before she headed home. Another interesting tidbit I learned is that Rhonda had actually planned on spending the night at her friend's home, but changed her mind and decided to go back home instead, for reasons unknown. One other thing that's worth noting is that Judy and Bobby Hinson are both still alive today, and they actually have differing opinions about the circumstances behind Rhonda's death. Judy still thinks it was premeditated murder, but Bobby believes that Rhonda might have been the victim of a freak accident gone wrong. And I gotta say, there's compelling arguments to support both scenarios. So I guess this is the perfect time to explore the theories about what might have happened. Now, the most baffling aspect of this crime is definitely the manner of death, which is so atypical for this sort of situation. Like I said earlier, Rhonda Hinson was just your average 19-year-old small-town girl, but if you look at the murder scene, you think that she was some high-value target who was assassinated by a professional sniper. If Rhonda was deliberately targeted, it's just incredible that the perpetrator was successful, and you'd almost think that they were firing some sort of magic bullet. I mean, what are the odds that someone could fire an absolutely perfect shot, which somehow travels all the way through the trunk of a moving vehicle, passes through the back seat, passes through the driver's seat, and manages to hit Rhonda point blank in the heart and kill her instantly? Not to mention that this would have also taken place in the middle of the night, on a dark road with virtually no lighting. I mean, even Lee Harvey Oswald's shot at JFK wasn't nearly as difficult as this one. In the Unsolved Mysteries segment, they do a reenactment in which they present a hypothetical scenario where the two men parked in the blue Chevy prompt Rhonda to stop her car once she exits the off-ramp, and then they fire the fatal shot at her while she's attempting to drive away again. Under those circumstances, I guess it's a bit more plausible that someone could have made a successful shot, but we don't know for sure if Rhonda did stop her car at that location. During the segment, Rhonda's mother says that Rhonda never would have stopped her car for a stranger while driving alone in the middle of the night, and given the paranoid behavior Rhonda had been displaying in the weeks prior, that sounds pretty likely. The only reason Rhonda would have been compelled to stop on that road was if she encountered someone she knew. So this begs the question, did someone in Rhonda's life orchestrate her murder? On the surface, that does sound like a plausible scenario, The sighting of the two men in the blue Chevy parked underneath the bridge near the off-ramp seems to indicate that someone knew Rhonda would be using this route to drive home that night and was planning to ambush her there. But there are a lot of what-ifs in this scenario. Like I mentioned earlier, Rhonda had originally planned to spend the night at her friend's house and didn't make the decision to drive home until the last minute. So how would her killers have known that? Rhonda did phone her boyfriend before she left her friend's house, but I just don't have enough information about the boyfriend or their relationship to form any theories about whether he could have been involved in Rhonda's murder or not. But of course, the killer might not have even known Rhonda was planning to stay at her friend's house, and just got very lucky when Rhonda changed her mind at the last second. However, one problem I have with the premeditated murder scenario is the way Rhonda's body was moved from her vehicle onto the road. Even though this was late at night, handling the body of a victim you just killed by the side of a public road, that's a very huge risk. If the man seen next to Rhonda's car was her killer, he's damn lucky that the witness who drove past him didn't decide to stop or get a better look at his face. If this man shot Rhonda on purpose, I could see him going over to check her body just to make sure she's dead, but I see no logical reason for him to place Rhonda's body on the road. The eyewitness sighting of the Trans Am is also a major wildcard here. Two men were originally seen together inside the blue Chevy, but only one man was seen inside the Chevy when it was speeding away from the scene. So I guess it's easy to assume that one of these two men could have been driving the Trans Am when he arrived at the scene and when he left. Now, as far as I know, the first witness who saw the Chevy parked underneath the bridge never reported seeing a Trans Am parked nearby, but it is possible that they could have just missed it. But I can't discount the possibility that the driver of the Trans Am might have just been an unknown third party who had no involvement in Rhonda's death, but simply saw her car in the ditch and pulled over to check on her. If you're wondering why an innocent motorist wouldn't come forward when they didn't do anything wrong, it's possible that he just didn't want to get involved and was paranoid about becoming a suspect in the murder. Maybe he had his own personal reasons for not contacting the police, like, say, maybe he was driving drunk that night or something. But if Rhonda really was deliberately targeted and murdered, who could the perpetrator have been? Given all these hypothetical scenarios about Rhonda being sexually assaulted or carrying on an affair with a married man, it's easy to assume that someone in the town could have murdered Rhonda to keep her quiet and prevent a potential scandal from breaking loose. I certainly can't discount that possibility, but there's one thing that is very difficult to keep under wraps: small town gossip. In 1981, Hickory, North Carolina had a population of just over 20,000 people, and the population of Valdese was just over 3,000. In small towns like this, gossip travels pretty damn fast. If Rhonda had any skeletons in her closet, I'd expect a lot more rumors to have surfaced. And aside from Rhonda's strange behavior, there is no real hard evidence that she was involved in anything scandalous, like carrying on an affair with a married man. And furthermore, we have eyewitness reports tying two specific vehicles to the murder scene. If there was anyone connected to Rhonda who owned a blue Chevy or a dark Trans Am, you'd think they would have been thoroughly investigated, but as far as I know, no tangible connection has ever been made. And this is why I lean towards the theory that Rhonda was killed by someone she did not know. Sure, it's still possible that Rhonda could have been sexually assaulted or carried on a secret affair with someone, but these things might have nothing to do with her death. Hell, maybe Rhonda's inquiries to her mother about dating a married man were just because she had interest in a married man, but she never actually acted on her impulses. Or maybe she had a friend who was interested in a married man and Rhonda was just inquiring on her behalf. Anytime a person is the victim of an unsolved murder, it's common for loved ones to remember strange moments from their life and somehow try to connect them to the crime. And I have a feeling this might be what's happened here. I'm inclined to believe that Rhonda may have just been the unfortunate victim of a freak accident. This whole case has made me think of a scene from the 2006 film Babel. an Oscar-nominated drama directed by Alejandro González Inarritu, who incidentally just won his second straight Academy Award for Best Director. In one of the film's storylines, two kids living in the Moroccan desert get possession of an M70 rifle. They're playing around with this rifle at the top of a cliff when one of them fires off a shot, and by complete chance, the bullet winds up passing through a tour bus a few kilometers away and ends up wounding Cate Blanchett's character. So I have to wonder if the same thing might have happened to Rhonda Hinson. Maybe some stupid people were just playing around with a rifle that night and, for whatever reason, ended up firing a shot which, against all odds, passed through Rhonda's entire vehicle and hit her straight in the heart. The odds of someone making that shot intentionally seem so minuscule that you'd have to think it was a freak accident. I just don't think the evidence points towards premeditated murder. I think the man who pulled Rhonda's body out of her car was involved, but he did not intend to kill her. The reason she was found on the road was because this man made at least some attempt to revive her. Whoever went to that trouble took a huge risk, and it's just blind luck that they weren't caught. Which is why I don't believe Rhonda was deliberately targeted. I also think that whoever sped away in the blue Chevy was probably connected to the man who pulled Rhonda out of the car, and he fled the scene in a panic. But whoever handled Rhonda's body at least wanted to see if he could save her before they took off. Now, of course, you might be wondering why people would just be playing around with a rifle at that particular location in the middle of the night. Well, it's possible they were just drunk and acting stupid by randomly firing shots at the road. I was actually just looking through the Google News archives, and I found a very brief article from the January 14th, 1982 edition of the Wilmington Star, which of course was published only 3 weeks after Rhonda's murder. Apparently there were complaints from two truckers traveling over that same Interstate 40 bridge that the trucks ended up being struck by objects which may have been bullets or rocks. Unfortunately, I cannot find any further information about this, and I have no idea if these incidents have any connection to Rhonda's murder, but it's interesting to think about. Given that this took place in the middle of the night, I was about to rule out the possibility of Rhonda being hit by a stray bullet from some hunting accident, but then I looked into an activity known as spotlighting. In the southern states, it's common for poachers to hunt at nighttime, and they do this by shining a spotlight directly into the animal's eye before shooting it. In fact, the practice was actually referenced in another famous unsolved mysteries case called The Boys on the Track, where two teenage boys from Arkansas were murdered in the woods while they were out spotlighting. As you probably guessed, spotlighting is illegal as hell in most places in North America, but I can't discount the possibility that someone was doing some spotlighting on the night of Rhonda's death, and that a stray bullet from a poacher's rifle somehow entered her car. So while I couldn't tell you the exact circumstances, it's my gut feeling that Rhonda Hinson was not deliberately murdered, and was the victim of either a prank gone wrong or a freak accident. But either way, even if Rhonda's death wasn't intentional, her family has been suffering for a long time now, and they deserve justice. I can only hope that whoever fired that fatal shot into Rhonda does answer for what they've done someday. So that's about it for this episode. If you happen to have any important information about the death of Rhonda Hinson, which has never been shared, please contact the appropriate authorities. Apparently there is still a $20,000 reward for information which could help close this case, so if you have something important to share, please do so. But if you just have your own theory about what might have happened to Rhonda, I'd love to hear from you. Hell, if you have some interesting information that wasn't covered here, feel free to leave me a comment or send me an email. I can be reached at robin.warder@primus.ca. That's ROBIN.WARDER@PRIMUS.ca. robin.warder@primus.ca. Also be sure to check us out on Facebook and Twitter and iTunes, and you can also check out my true crime and mystery articles at crack.com and listverse.com. And there's also plenty of other non-true crime content you can find right here at the back row. So have yourself a good 2 weeks, and join me next time for another edition of The Trail Went Cold.
The Trail Went Cold is part of the Back Row Podcast Network. Visit the-back-row.com for more. The theme song was composed by Vince Nitro.